Welcome back to the Tempo podcast. I do a longer introduction, but I have a lot to get through today with my guests. So welcome to the stage, Victoria. How are you doing?
Hi, great to be here. Thanks for having me. I'm doing well.
Good to have you on. I've got a lot to ask you, so I hope you're sat comfortably. Now, when we met a couple of weeks ago, we talked through your career and the various places and roles, seniorities that you've been at. You've been at, is it fair to say, every role in the sales function or nearly every, something like that?
Yes, I pretty much say I have worked my way up from the bottom to where I am and pretty much done every sales role along the way and earned my bruises and scratches in each one.
Off the bat, what one was your favorite?
A favorite for me was being an account executive, being an individual contributor, managing my own time, making my own money. And I'd say back in the early days.
Was that full cycle though? Because I was about to give you some grief for saying work, IC, but taking someone else's deals. But if you're full cycle, I retract that. I'm sorry.
Full cycle. Yeah. Back in my AE days, and I'm aging myself maybe slightly, the BDR AE relationship wasn't as established. And I was doing end to end from the cold calling and the outreach at the beginning through to the paperwork and the contracting at the end. And there's no feeling like it. I'm in sales. I love winning. And that's definitely my favorite role, just stacking up the wins and learning from the losses.
Fair enough. Okay, so what we're going to do today, we're going to go through each of the roles that you've had. Maybe in a second, we should line out exactly what they were and roughly how long you were at each. Tell us a little bit about maybe the industry and so on for everything to add some flavor. But one by one, we're going to go through what was the average day like, maybe the average week or month, whatever kind of has the most meat to it. And maybe we'll try and compare the differences. I think many people particularly in big companies, you're kind of siloed as you are X rank and whatever other rank, whether up or down or left or right, it's completely different. And that's often the case in different industries. So it'd be quite nice to know what was your experience. So walk us through each of the roles that you've got and add a bit of flavor to each.
Okay, we're going back in the archives here and I'll probably be showing my age, but I should probably preface this whole intro to my career in that sales was a bit of an accident for me to fall into. I know that's the case with a lot of us salespeople. Typically, you go to school or university and you learn a function. You're a marketer, or you learn engineering, or you learn product or accounting. You don't get many people who wake up and go, I want to be a B2B salesperson. We typically find ourselves here accidentally on purpose. And that's certainly what happened to me. So I'm a business school grad, studied the usual standard things we did in business school and didn't really enjoy any of it, and kind of graduated thinking, well, I have to work in business because I went to business school and what the heck am I going to do? And fell into the role of an entry-level BDR accidentally. And I never really looked back. I kind of found the perfect place for my skill set, I think, and enjoy talking and meeting people. Never really enjoyed some of the other sides of what I'd learned at school. So that's kind of how I got into this. So in terms of my career path, Ollie, and stop me if I can expand on any of these, started as that entry-level BDR, doing 100 cold calls a day. It was lonely. For me, I started my career in a startup. I think that's a big difference there, Ali. You touched on it. In a bigger company, you kind of have a set job description and set tasks, and you just do those at the beginning of your career and you're good. And I started, I think, really jumping feet first into the flames as a BDR in a tech startup. So you have the title of BDR, but you're really doing a little bit of everything. I would jump on the phone 100 calls in a day. I'd love it. I love talking. The no's were never really a problem for me because I think the high I'd get from the wins, from the people that actually took my call and wanted to learn what we were selling, were really addictive to me. And back in those early days, I was selling really cool tech, really cool software into the NHL. So, for those of you who are into sports, for me to be able to, call into big hockey teams, even big football teams, sports and entertainment, and get these meetings with, I remember getting a meeting with the Green Bay Packers and the Toronto Maple Leafs and all these cool sports brands. And I'm a young British female with no real idea. And I think ignorance was bliss. So started as BDR. moved through to being an account executive. So I did about 2 years in that seat as a BDR, loved it, learned so much. And again, we were a startup. So every time I would set up calls and set up meetings and uncover opportunities, it was our head of sales at the time, who I'm still great friends with, who would lead those sales calls. And I was really privileged at that time that I was able to sit in on all of them, even though I was young and very green and not running the full sales cycle myself. I got 2 years of literally sitting on the sidelines and watching some of the best in the biz do that. And then I stepped into being an AE myself. So like we touched on, managing end-to-end sales cycles. That was a really fun role for me, one of my favorite. It was my first foray into really big 6-figure software deals. And as a girl who grew up not coming from a lot and, hungry for success and probably money, if I'm honest, to see, to be able to be positioning $500,000 to $1 million software deals, was really exhilarating for me as an AE. And I also managed a really amazing territory at that time. I looked after Vegas and California. So my first AE job, I was getting on a plane and I was selling to Sony Pictures in LA and Disney, and then hop into Vegas and, selling to some of the biggest hotels on the Strip in Vegas. So really cool role. Definitely sold through direct and channel. That was my first role. I'd say I really started understanding the value of channel and what they, it's always about what they can do for me, but also what I could do for them. Really started building up a mutual two-way respect for channel, and ended up crushing my number and just having a lot of fun. Any questions there, Ollie? Or you want me to move into my leadership side?
No, perfect so far. And then, so it's BDR, AE, and then what is it, leadership role next or other roles?
Yes. Yeah, so I did that. That was combined almost 10 years of my career, I think 8.5, 9 years in the direct selling role. And then I became a mama. Best job I've ever had. I had my kids. And as many women, I think, in sales find themselves, it's quite hard to maintain the AE pace, getting on an airplane, traveling into territory when you got young babies at home screaming at you all hours of the day. So it was around that time, about 8, 9 years ago, that I stepped into leadership. Just through my network and through opportunities that arose for me, I stepped into my first director of sales role and felt like I was really ready. Again, it was another startup scale up. I seem to find myself in those situations. And I started with managing a small team of 4, which was perfect. Started earning my stripes, and we can talk about that a little later, and challenges, but definitely experienced a little bit of teething problems, no pun intended, stepping into leadership at that point. What was really cool about that role for me, and I always encourage salespeople, sometimes we're only trained to look at new revenue. As an AE, you're focusing on new logos and bringing in new business. When I stepped into leadership, I was actually looking at the other side of the coin as well. It was how we prevent churn, how we expand existing customers. And obviously, we all know the sentiment that it's cheaper to expand an existing customer than acquire a new one. So that was really cool for me stepping into leadership. Even though it was in a startup, I was able to own both sides of the coin and really understand that new logos are great. But if you've got a massive churn problem and there's massive headwind on your target and on your quota, it becomes hard. So that was really cool. Small team, did that for a couple of years. And then it typically happens in leadership. I think I wanted more. I got chomping at the bit for a bit more. I wanted a bigger team. I wanted a bigger number. I wanted, bigger global presence. And the startup I was at wasn't at that stage. So that was when I moved to a B2B payments company. That was my largest leadership role. Again, I was only a couple of years in to sales leadership and people management. And I got landed with leading a team of 26 BDRs and AEs in a sales org. Big team, big numbers, a Google Ventures backed company. It was kind of a dream come true for me. And loved that role. I mean, it was a day in the life of that role. There is a lot of data and KPIs and CRM reports you're running when you manage a team of 26 people. And I think that's something I hadn't really experienced, because even when I was managing a team of 4, I was still kind of in and on every deal, whilst the reps were running them over the line. There wasn't a lot going on in the sales org I didn't know about. And stepping into a large role and managing a large team, for me, who's a little bit of a perfectionist and a bit of a control freak, to have 26 reps all running multiple deals, I couldn't be in every single one of them. So really relying on the data, really relying on the CRM, to give me what I needed to help make business decisions, that was a new feeling for me. And then, I went from there into actual revenue leadership. And I always say the main difference there is, my most recent role actually managing or running the sales org, the marketing org, and the product org, all reporting into me. And that is, when we talk about most enjoyable roles, Ollie, I think from my side, from a business leadership side, the alignment between sales and marketing and product is something that they're a little bit like neighbors. You don't know you have a good neighbor until you move house and you move into a terrible one, and then you really miss your previous neighbors. I think that alignment between sales and marketing, sometimes you don't know about it when it's good because everything seems pretty seamless anyway. And then you maybe go to a different company where sales, marketing, and product are not aligned. And I really love the revenue leadership role where I get to have all of them reporting into me, because I think being able to rely on strategy and really sales to understand what marketing are doing, to share that number. I'm a big fan of revenue marketing. I love fonts and colors marketing, and I love what brand people do. And I never claim to know about that. But I think when marketing can share that revenue number and it all reports into a revenue leader, for me, that was one of the most fulfilling roles of my career, was kind of to oversee all of that. And again, a day in the life in that role, gosh, that could be anything and everything. That's one thing I learned as I progressed in my sales leadership career, is the higher you progress, the less you sell. And, when you asked me my favorite role, it's interesting. I think for me, I had the most fun and the most twinkle in my eye when I was selling, and I was just, doing my thing. And I think as you move up in leadership, there's definitely pros, but that's certainly something I missed. And a day in the life of a revenue leader was, yes, I was kept in the loop of large deals, and I certainly helped strategize and price many of them out with the teams. But I really missed that day to day. The feeling of being in deals and running them over the line is something, I would get reports and notifications from our CRM when that was happening, and not necessarily on the ground when they were going on. So yeah, it was a big transition. And then, that's kind of brought me to where I am today. And we can talk about, my transition from revenue leadership to my current role. But hopefully that answers a little bit a day in the life of the progression through, Ollie, for you.
It does, yeah. Okay, so you're talking about missing the really early days. Let's go back into them and take a bit of a deeper, okay. I hate the phrase deep dive, it's so overused, but we'll use it. So BDR, extremely green, small company, you're kind of doing more than the role, as is usually the case. I've been there and done that too. It's you learn a lot more than you probably should. You're doing a lot more than you're probably qualified for. At least that was me most of my career. So I empathize a lot. So you have a head of sales, I think you said, who would maybe take the call after a certain point once you set the appointment. So you're doing 100 calls a day, maybe plus. You're doing a bunch of emails. You're talking to people like the Packers and other sports teams, that sort of thing. How do you go? So tell me about the struggles and what was fun and what worked out of that. I'm already picturing you talking to multi-billion-dollar company just to talk about the Packers alone. That isn't easy. Probably longer deal cycles unless you were selling something different. That's not easy to walk straight into. Transactional and quicker things, cheaper things are easier if you're very new. And then we'll go to your next role in a moment. But you went very further upstream. We're talking in the millions. That's multi-threading, several months, etc. So you sort of jumped on, not at step one, but a couple steps up the kind of deal size ladder, as it were. So tell me about that.
Yeah, great question. So it's funny, back in those early BDR days, I think what worked for me, I was really good at it. I'd have to say I do try and be humble, but that was one role. I crushed that role. And I think part of the reason why is because ignorance was bliss for me. I am a British girl who's found herself this side of the pond, and it was my work that moved me here. And I found myself in the startup, and I'm young and I don't really understand a ton other than I love chatting to people. I know what the product does. I love that. I've seen it in action. So I think ignorance was bliss, and accidental success in that role is kind of what happened to me. I wasn't aware that it was really cool to be on a meeting with the head of marketing of the Green Bay Packers, because I didn't know. Now at my career, if one of my reps came to me and said, we've got a meeting with the Packers, I'd be a little bit starstruck and I'd be delighted and I'd make sure we were prepped. Again, back then, I was like, oh, okay, cool. Like, I got us a meeting with the Packers, and it was my boss who was like, what? They took a call and you got a meeting. So, I think part of the day in the life of the BDR role, it was quite a lonely role when you're doing it. I think when you're in a larger company and there's a pit of you, that traditional Wolf of Wall Street style sales pit, you can have a bit of fun. There can be some competition, some collaboration, some banter, all the things that our personality types thrive off of. I think for me in that role, I was a bit of a lone ranger. I was the only one in the startup. We were only a team of, I think, 15, 16 at that time. We did exit that business and sold that, and it was really fun to be a part of. But yeah, I think I was a bit lonely and a bit green. So I kind of made it up as I went along, which I think many of us do in a startup, Ollie, where you think, well, that needs to be done and that needs to be done. And I kind of made up the concept of social selling before social selling was a thing. I was one of the really early users on LinkedIn. I remember being really, really early on that platform. And I guess I figured I want to meet with the Packers. I'll send the person a LinkedIn message. So I crafted a LinkedIn message. And the stuff that now we put process and thought and data behind, I didn't have any of that then. It just was common sense to me. So I think that was something that was really nice at that stage of my career when you are in a startup. And I always say to salespeople, you've got to do a bit of a stint in a startup because that is where you earn those stripes and you get to be creative. Because as you get into bigger companies, and you probably know this, Ollie, firsthand, as you start going up the scale, there's less and less flexibility to kind of have fun and play dumb and be green and experiment around, because there's a lot more process and a lot more rules and bigger HR team that you have to consider. So that was the BDR role for me. The other thing I had to really learn in that role that set me up for my career was basic admin and time management. I'd gone to university. I understand the concept of deadlines and I did well at school, but this was a little different. This, when you're managing multiple time zones in North America here, obviously we have 3, not to mention you guys in the UK, and I'm trying to coordinate meetings across multi-time zones, multiple calendars, using, at that time, WebEx. I think we were using WebEx, the tool. Those tools are all really new. I really had to be on top of my game from a focus perspective. It's not difficult work, but it's focused work. Like, okay, setting up these meetings, following up, making the calendar invites, getting the WebEx details in, making sure audio is working, all that stuff that now we do in our sleep. It was quite new then. And there definitely were some head scratching times when I was trying to set up meetings across different time zones and make sure everyone's calendars were okay. And, I don't miss that. It set me up well, though, for my life. I manage my 2 kids now and their schedules. It's very similar. But that was definitely a big skill I learned early on in my career, was prioritization and time management across calendars.
Very good. Okay, I got one more on this role, and then I think we'll go to your favorite one. You talk pretty glowingly about the relationship with the head of sales at that company. So did they kind of act as the somewhat AE kind of thing, like the closer in a sense? So what was your cutoff point? And then I'm assuming, like you said, you'd kind of sit in on the calls that followed, and you'd maybe see the deal close or whatever else. But what was the so you're still friends with that person? Did they teach you much? Did they coach you? Was it more like you were being encouraged and you did something and they tell you feedback afterwards? How did all of that kind of work? Because it is I think it depends a lot in that type of company, what you're like and what that person's like. And there's not a lot more thought into it because there's not enough time or people or bandwidth. It's just, this is how it is. And I've been there before where you've got a really good feedback-centric person in front of you, and that's great for you. And occasionally you don't have that, and you've got to bring it to them, and then you get it. There's just kind of luck of the draw. So it sounds like you had a great relationship with that person.
Yeah, I did. And he'll probably be listening to this. I was so fortunate, and I say this again to some young people I mentor now. One of the biggest blessings in my life and my career is that I have been surrounded by a few key people who have shaped where I've gone and who I've become. And this role, the head of sales at the time, still a great friend of my family, it was one of those people that I just absolutely changed the trajectory of my career. I was green and I was very new, but he spotted in me, I think, talent, I hope, I think he'd say, and a spark and a natural ability for sales and for communication. And he really did invest the time in me to help me get to that next level. He knew I would outgrow that BDR role really quickly. I did it in front of his eyes. And I think, you touch on it, Ollie, that relationship between an AE and a BDR can be really, really nice. It can also be full of friction if they're not the right type, if there's egos, if the AE thinks that the BDR is coming for their job, we all are, no one has an aspiration to be a BDR for their whole career. I was really fortunate that we were in a startup, that the head of sales had no ego. It was the opposite. He wanted me to learn so much and was really acutely aware, I think, of his impact on me from a mentorship capacity and a learning capacity. There wasn't a room I wasn't invited into alongside of him. I never felt like I was too junior to be on the sales calls. And we had a lot of fun. We tag teamed really well. And I'd always say, the relationship between the BDR and we'd make jokes together on calls. I remember that Green Bay Packers call so well. And the customer jumped on the call and I opened it in classic me fashion, making some, I've got, I named him here with me and, he can't believe we're on with the Packers. And I can't remember what I'd said, but it was a real rapport building. We had this lovely rapport build between us that I think customers really gravitated to when we were on calls together. So whilst he, I would say the handover, I wasn't mature enough to honestly run end to end. I had no real negotiation training or anything at that point. So we would the handover would be at the start of the qualified call. I would obviously qualify and set up that initial, whether it's a web demo or a discovery call. And then the head of sales at the time would take over but again, would make it really interactive with me in the room. I remember several times he'd say things like, Victoria, did I miss anything there? Or, Victoria, anything that you wanted to add there? And he'd really try to include me. And I tell him all the time so it wouldn't be a surprise. But that impact on my career and my life, it did give me the confidence when I had the chance to step into an AE role and do it myself. I felt so well prepared because I probably sat through the best part of 250 calls that he'd done. And some had tanked and gone so south that, how it goes, the two of us got off the phone cringing and it was bad. And others, we won some massive logos. And we were a tiny startup who did, we won deals we should never have won. And we did it because of, I think, his skill and his tenacity. And so, yeah, I think just going back to your initial question, the handover would have came really early in the sales cycle. I was really fortunate enough to be able to shadow it right through. And again, I would always say to BDRs today, when you're joining an organization, to really try and understand where that handover is and see if there is the opportunity to join and shadow AEs, because that is hands down the best experience. You can train AEs, but it's so much better for them to learn it in real time from people who can do it.
Beautiful. Okay, so let's move up one. I think if I'm managing our time a little bit, we've probably got 5-10 minutes on this one, similar for your management roles. And then I got a different segment for you, which I haven't briefed you on. So I'm going to surprise you and panic you a little bit. But AE, you said your favorite, you're flying over to Vegas and places like that. As a British person who works with a lot of North Americans, I get picked up on the accent all the time. Let's start with that. When you're traveling around the Strip and places like that in Vegas, is there something that people immediately say to you at the start of the meeting? So where are you from? That type of thing, because I get it a lot.
I think it's the number one reason for my successful sales career in North America, Ollie, is that my British accent is still, shining through. Sales ability, maybe. A great accent, definitely. So yes, the accent definitely opened some doors, I would say, for me and helped build some relationships. For some reason, people just love the British accent over here. So I did get lucky with that one.
I can say similar in the marketing world a little bit. It's always, where are you from? Because they don't get, I don't think I sound posh at all, like zero, but North American people think I'm, I smoke pipes and things like that, but I don't.
Your British accent is way stronger than mine, Ollie. I've been here in Canada for 15 years and my two kids both have these funny hybrid accents now that they still say mummy, but then every other word is Canadian. And yours, it's nice to hear because it really sounds like proper British, like I'm back home. So
you've retained it pretty well. I didn't, when we were first talking, I couldn't tell. I just thought you were living and staying in England. So fair enough.
There we go. Perfect. No, I haven't lost it.
So flying around quite a lot and meeting a bunch of people in person. You said yourself a people person, like to talk to people, that sort of thing, extroversion. What's that like? Getting the territory, bigger deals. I imagine there was a bit of an adjustment for you, just going in terms of the numbers alone to, if you're going to earn X amount and then you're talking about 5X, wow. if you're going to sell X and it's 5X, equally wow, especially the first few times you propose the pricing. It's probably a little bit of a gulp when you say it. How was that for you?
I think you summed it up. I think this role for me, I don't even know how to say it. Almost felt like I was acting a little bit. You've probably seen the movie Catch Me If You Can, where, you're on the plane, you're doing all this glam stuff. I ended up, my first AE role, this was obviously way pre-pandemic when, virtual calls and presentations are done, and it really getting on site and in front of customers and partners was the way business was done. And I think a little bit of that ignorance is bliss thing, I had just kind of breezed through and was like, okay, cool. Yeah, I'll fly to LA and meet with Disney. No problem. And I get there. And I think that's one thing about me that maybe, I think even now in my older years, I'm less this way. But back then I wasn't particularly impressed by names and logos. Now, if in my career, I had a meeting with Disney or Sony Pictures, I'd be like, really, really cool. And these, at the time, nothing really fazed me. I think I was just breezing through. So yeah, I used to do quite a bit of time in territory and try and use my time really wisely. I did have a young baby at home at that time. That was just after the birth of my son. And it's not nice being away from a young baby, even though secretly have a couple of nights in a hotel sleeping and actually not being woken up by a screaming baby is really nice. The mama in me missed my son. So really tried to keep those trips short and condensed, maximize the time. I know other AEs would go for a week. I would try and do it in 3 days, and I would just do morning, noon, night, meet 9 people in 3 days and, come back and fill my pipeline for that quarter. So the bigger price points are a really interesting one. And I think many people who sell software, particularly as the SaaS model started emerging, and we're really looking at recurring revenue models, and you start seeing those price tags over multi-year deals. I definitely remember quoting, it was one of the big hotels in Vegas, and they had 55,000 seats. You can probably guess which one. And I remember putting together a proposal and a quote for them, and I had to go back to my calculator 3 times. We didn't even have it built into the CR. There's no auto quoting back then. It was like the dinosaur ages. So I'm manually trying to do the math and thinking there is no way in a million years someone could spend this with me. And then typically, like every salesperson does, I would do the math on the quote. And then the next line of math is, so if this closed, what commission do I get? And that was always my driver, I think, as it is many salespeople. You're lying if you haven't calculated the commission on these large deals. So no, it was really surreal for me at that time. Again, I didn't come from a background where I was seeing this kind of money at all. And the startup world in my previous role, our average contract value when we were selling into sports teams was anywhere between 50 and 100K a year. And now suddenly I'm selling cybersecurity solutions, and we're, 250 to 500 to 750 to over $1 million a year. I had to just kind of keep a level head, not show my shock. And it's so funny. You only need to do 1 or 2 of them and realize that isn't a big sticker shock in that industry. We all know the cost of a cyber breach. We see it in the newspaper all the time, and the amount of millions, not to mention reputational damage that comes with cyber breaches. So when you are selling cybersecurity solutions, that price tag was really defensible. And I closed a lot of business. And you know what? I really enjoyed the face-to-face. I had some really nice meals in Vegas. I had some nice glasses of wine in Vegas. I was late 20s. I stayed in some hotels that I, again, in my wildest dreams, even now in my life, couldn't and wouldn't pay that much a night for. So it definitely gave me a really privileged and really enjoyable insight into the world of an AE. And like I said, for me, I was always hitting my number, and I was just having a ton of fun, and kind of got to this place where I was like, okay, what's next? I've made a load of money. I have my kid at home. We wanted to have another baby. We were, planning for our second child. And that was when I kind of felt like I could do this forever, and I'm really enjoying it. But I wonder if the grass is greener in sales leadership, because I haven't tried that yet. And that was kind of my evolution into the next role.
Love it. Okay. Really quick one before we move on to that. So you'd mentioned in the first company, there was pretty much just you plus your superior. So then you mentioned a couple of the other AEs. I don't think we went through this, but how much of a team was there? Because I'm thinking of just kind of like my first question about this, the step up in numbers and so on. Obviously, the price doesn't mean half as much as you think it does to that type of person, but it's just it's new to you. But how much were you able to talk to other people who are in the same boat and kind of pick up what they're doing or any of that kind of stuff? Because I imagine if there's territories, there's obviously a bunch, but how many people and what was the sort of supply chain of, was there people feeding you? There wasn't people feeding you appointments, but did you take others with you or just yourself and go, or what happened?
Yeah, great question. So that role, I didn't have a BDR. I've actually never had a BDR in any of the sales roles I've done. I've kind of done it myself. And now I see AEs that get BDRs and they get appointments in their calendar. And I've got a whole other school of thought on that.
I could tell what it is.
Yeah, I would do it end to end. We were a team, I think at that point, probably 18 to 20 AEs covering with global coverage to territories. So I certainly did have peers. And I think that's a really important question when you join a new role. And for me, cybersecurity was a new industry at that time. Being able to shadow the other AEs in the business is really crucial. We should all be asking to do that. I think there's something to learn from even good AEs or bad. You want to shadow both because you want to figure out what works and what doesn't. So I definitely made a conscious effort to do that and to collaborate with my peers. We all, had our own territories, but besides that, we shared everything else. We shared, obviously the company number and our individual quotas and targets for our territories were very similar. So yeah, I definitely felt like there were others in the same boat as me. I think the real advantage I seemed to gain in that role accidentally on purpose was really leveraging the channel. So at that point we had the choice as reps, I had to hit my number. Didn't matter if it was a direct or indirect revenue. So through channel or direct, I just had to hit my number. And I think my business acumen really helped me kind of figure out how and where I was going to do that. Work smart, not hard, or whatever the phrase is. So building that relationship with channel is where I found a lot of collaboration in that role. So, your channel partners, I remember McAfee and Symantec and some of those really big guys back then, they are in every deal I could dream of being in, every logo in LA, in Vegas. I could dream of landing as this little, British sales girl here. They're in them. So I very quickly figured there's not a lot of point in me trying to do this myself, although I can. And I did get some luck actually with direct meetings and being able to cultivate sales ops on my own. I was like, okay, I'm going to collaborate. I want to join the channel's training. I want to make sure my channel are more enabled than any other partner is enabling them. I really spent conscious time building up my relationships with my channel, making sure they got a lot of love from me, and it paid off tenfold. It sounds really calculated when I say it like that, and it wasn't. I just, I'd really make the conscious effort. I remember sending them birthday cards. I remember checking in after their kids' birthday parties. I remember being in Vegas and, really investing the time and joining them, and it paid off dividends for me. It hit my number, fearlessly. And so, yeah, I think collaboration wise for me, it was my peers on the channel in that role.
Okay, good stuff. I think probably 10 more minutes of your last role, because I know this is one where a lot of our listeners are going to be sitting in their career or thereabouts. So sales leadership, first time out, I think you said it was 26 people on your team, there or thereabouts, of various roles. First time management, although I think you said firstly you joined with a team of 4, which again is slightly different. First time manager, difficult thing. I've been there. I had wanted to do it in my whole career anyway, so I'd kind of taken half steps, so it wasn't really a big deal for me. But 26 people at whatever point a couple of years later on is different. It's a whole different type of management. It's not just I've got 4 humans who are X type of personality and need ABC from me. It's now hierarchies within hierarchies. It's now reports. It's now the infrastructure more, if anything, than the people. I would even go as far as to say, you might disagree. How do you adapt to all of that? Well, I'm looking for, what was it like? So one week by week in the team of 4, I'm guessing a one-on-one with each, maybe even each day, depending what the roles are. Sometimes that's not necessary. But then as you go to the other team, I'm guessing just the team leaders of the team who maybe run each 5 to 10 each, something like that.
Yeah, you nailed it, Ollie. And I think I'm quite self-aware. And I honestly say my transition. So I was a really good rep. I loved it. I was good at it. Made my number, made my money, had a really nice little life. And then I thought, I'm going to go into leadership because that's the next step. And I think many of us as an IC get there. I think you touched on that yourself, Ollie. I think I could do it. I'd like to try it. And like I said, I've been surrounded by great leaders all my life. So I figured that was my next step. And of course, I'd be really good at it because I was really good at sales. Well, I think the biggest reality shock and humble pie moment for me is it wasn't actually natural for me at all. So when I stepped into leadership, thankfully, my first role was a team of 4. And without using gender here, they were 4. It was actually 4 girls and me. And it was a really safe role for me to step into. I found, I was older and at a different life stage to them, but I was able to relate and we got on really well. I think there's a difference between being kind and being nice as a leader. I think I made some mistakes in that I was very, very nice. I wanted people to like me. And I think that can happen. You can do it with kindness. I think leading with nicety was a bit of a mistake for me in that role, not a reflection on their performance, but I struggled to navigate that balance between not wanting to sell myself, not being able to be in every deal, right? We're already 4-1 on coverage and I can't do that. I'm a perfectionist. I'm a bit of a control freak. So I'm used to controlling my own income, my own deals, my own success. I think to hand the reins over to a team of 4, even though I loved them dearly, they were great and I trusted them. It was hard for me to watch them do it when I frankly knew I could have done it, probably different. A week in the life of a smaller team, it was a very safe introduction to leadership for me. I wouldn't say it was easy. One-on-ones definitely every week with the team. We would do, at that point, we were selling quite transactional, quite small value event management software, 20 to 50K in value. We would have a quick sync every morning. Actually, I remember really being all over pipeline, just a quick 15 minutes every morning with the 4 of us, 4 of them and me, a huddle in the room, looking at where we were. Sales cycles were really short too. Like we could have anywhere between a 48-hour and a 3-week sales cycle. So you kind of got to be on it. There's no looking a quarter out. I mean, it wasn't really a thing then. We would get leads, we'd tee them up, we'd go to bat and we'd close them or we'd not. So that was a safer role. Yes, I was starting to really look into CRM data in a different capacity then. I think when you're managing teams, you want to look at different KPIs necessarily than what you were holding yourself accountable to as an AE. Obviously, revenue and attainment to quota would always be relevant. I was starting to look at different KPIs. I was looking at the churn number. I was looking at activity KPIs. I was looking at marketing, top to bottom of funnel KPIs, funnel velocity, like some new stuff I hadn't looked at. And it was all quite comfortable for me with a team that size. I think it was okay. And I was doing okay. I didn't feel like I was crushing it at that role, but the team were doing okay and we were hitting our number and the board were all happy with me. So that was good. And then in typical Victoria fashion, I get a call from a headhunter and it's for a Google Ventures backed fintech scale up, I should say. They weren't a startup at that time, that many millions in revenue. And they were looking for a sales leader in Ottawa and they wanted to chat with me. And I thought I could do it. Okay, I've done the team of 4. Now I'm moving up to the team of 26. This is a large team. And Ollie, you touched on it. This is now, we're looking at bureaucracy a little bit. We're looking at a hierarchy within that group. I didn't have 26 direct reports. I had team leads, but I did have direct relationships with 26 people. So classic me, I thought, well, we'll fake it till we make it, or we'll ignorance is bliss, whatever my phrase is. I think I can do this role. I took that role and that was one of the most challenging and humbling roles I've ever done. And I wouldn't go back to. It is not my strong suit. Managing of a BDR team is very tactical. It sometimes feel like micromanagement when you're looking at those calls in a day. I know I made 100 calls a day when I was doing the job. The problem is people don't do that. And I ended up having to really, when I started looking into data and it wasn't making sense, and you can imagine out of a team of 26 in any bell curve, you've got top performers who are crushing it. You've got a whole mediocrity group who are clocking in and clocking out and doing their thing. And then there are people at the bottom of the curve. And I didn't get that with my team of 4. They were brilliant before. So, for me, that role was really challenging in that I had to manage down and up and figure out equal parts of my time. So the managing down thing, I have a type A, quite a a bold personality. I really don't like conflict. It's not something I'd been trained in. And like I said, when you become a leader, people don't really train you in it. You don't go to business school and learn how to be a people manager. You just don't. And, so if you're fortunate in your life, you've been led by great leaders and you absorb some of their skills and what works for you and you develop it. For me, I wasn't very good at putting people on pips. I felt like sad doing that. And that doesn't make sense. But it was where I was at that time in my life and my career. And I definitely used to leave the office a lot of times in that role and just have that classic, what have I done? I shouldn't have taken this role. I shouldn't be here. This is, this needs somebody tougher than me. This needs somebody more bold than me. There was a lot of cleanup. That was my first role that I hired a lot of people, and I like that side. I really like meeting people interested in sales and seeing where they're at. I also had to terminate a lot of people in that role. And that for me as a mom of young kids, and I found it really hard and really emotionally draining. So, a day in the life there, we talk about managing down. You can imagine from coaching reps, giving group training sessions, individual coaching sessions. I would be doing call listening. I certainly wasn't in deals at every stage, but I would listen to reps' calls and then, provide coaching. And you can imagine on a scale of 26 people, even if I could give an hour a week per rep, my week is majority gone already. So that, managing that and relying on data, and then the data doesn't really tell you what you hope to see. So that was a challenge. I think that was one of the first roles where managing up also became a challenge for me. When you are in that leadership role and you're essentially responsible for the revenue output or the sales output of 26 people, I mean, you'd expect it, but the CEO was on the phone every day to me asking, what is going on here and what's happening here and why is this KPI down and why is that number down? And for me, I'd gone from this cushy little AE role where I was controlling my own destiny and loving it and my own success. And then suddenly, the work that other people are doing is what's dictating your success. And definitely, we talk about imposter syndrome and just overwhelm. That was a role for me that the team was too big. In hindsight, I think, for me to be successful in that role. And also, I think leadership in that role, it was, that daily kind of like, what's going on from the C-suite actually isn't conducive to fostering a collaborative relationship or successful sales org, because when you are looking at data on the minutia by the hour, you're not getting the bigger picture view at all. We're not able to make strategic decisions if we're looking at stuff every day. What we're doing is tactical response. Well, that's fine until the end of the quarter where you ask where the strategic vision was. And we've been playing whack-a-mole all day, every day with kind of rapid fire observations. So anyway, I was in that role for a while. I loved it. And then I learned a lot from it. And I thought, you know what? I am going to be dead by a certain age if I continue in this role. This is not for me. And this is for some people. Some sales leaders, and I've met them, would thrive in an environment like that. And for me, it wasn't for me at all. So made the decision to step away and have a reevaluation and look at what my next leadership role looked like.
I'm glad you made the choice. That's I feel similar. If it was me, I don't like having arguments and that sort of thing. I'm fine with it, but it's just not my choice. I'm not a particularly conflict-led person, really. I prefer to be not best buds with everyone, but I prefer to get on with everyone in the room pretty well. So I can see exactly 100%. The sort of fit that where you've come and gone, and maybe in another company, different type of thing, same size, it would be different, but I understand. Yeah. So okay, I'm going to switch up on you a little bit. I want to get a story from you. So for a few minutes before I do my last surprise for you, and then I'll let you go. Can you tell me about a story you've been through where any of these roles, I'm going to guess which one it might come from, you've overcame a really difficult challenge, and what was it and what happened and how did it go? I'm thinking something like you had a really great rep and they quit because you had a falling out, and then you got to deal with it and replace someone who's going to hit the number, or you've really massively made a big mistake on a big account or something like that. You've rectified it. What was it? How'd you do it?
Ooh, okay. That's an interesting one. Okay. So an interesting one I had, I don't know if this would be a best or worst, but it sticks with me. I was managing this large team of 26, and there was one individual, and I can't use bad language on this call. He was never straight with me. I'll just let you know his gender just in case he's listening. But I didn't know that at the time. So when I go into a relationship with anybody, I kind of lead with, I'll trust you until you give me a reason not to. I like you until you give me a reason not to. So obviously I go in, meet the team, everything's great. And there's this one individual who it just is great. And he's telling me everything I want to hear. And I'm seeing great things. And thank goodness he's on my team here. And gosh, he's my eyes and ears and all this stuff. And then remember I said you kind of have to start digging into the data, because I kind of go on gut feeling. That's your first meet and greet. And then you start digging into the data. And I remember seeing data on this individual, activity levels, particularly I was looking at this point, right? A team of 26, we had aggressive targets. We were in network expansion. So it really had to be a significant number of outreach reps in a day to remotely get the chance. And I'm looking, and I remember refreshing the report in Salesforce, and this person's activity levels were the lowest on the team. And I'm thinking, no, that can't be right. He's great. No, I love him. Okay, so I'm, you know how it goes. I'll pull the report another way. I'm not. So I slice and dice the data every which way to realize that this guy is completely misleading his level of contributions, his motivations, his desired leadership position in the team. And he's telling me everything I want to hear because he's really good at managing up. He's not actually doing his job. And I remember having to raise that conversation with the individual, and we did that. And I wouldn't say we put him on a pip, but it was definitely it was a tough conversation. I had it with HR in the room to say, hey, look, this is what the data is showing. What do you have to say? And of course he had an answer and could talk his way around it and could talk his way out of it. And I think the optimist in me really wanted to believe him, because I don't want to have to, you know, that's easy. And then it carried on. And there was a really poor performance problem with this individual. And I had to end up terminating them. And again, I always felt really bad when I had to make those decisions. I think other leaders don't, as part of business. It's never easy for me. I hate the idea of taking away somebody's ability to pay their rent or their mortgage, regardless of the fact that you're a terrible performer. It doesn't sit well. And I ended up having to terminate this individual. And when I did it, he stood up and punched the table that we were sitting at. And he stood up and almost lunged himself over the table towards me. And luckily HR was in the room. And I had a feeling that this could go volatile. So I had a male sturdy built colleague in the room who intervened on that situation. But yeah, we talk about hard things and difficult things. That was a really hard. I felt really let down and sad that this person I'd like kind of gone in. If you'd said to me on end of week 1 or 2, you know, who's the most promising rep in the business? Who's the one that, you know, the front of the horse race of 26, it would have been him. And it turned out he completely disappointed me and underperformed. And then seeing his behavior in the exit was really tough for me. I still go back to that sometimes. So that would have been the challenging one.
That's a shame. So I'm picturing what would I feel like. I've never had to do something like that, but I'm picturing it's the gap between first impressions and the wow to the, oh, that's really bad. And then how you get it. It's not even so much, I don't even think your problem with this was having to do the letting them go, because, you know, as you said, kind of what they've performed dictates what you have to do. But I think it's in your mind, you've gone, it's like firing someone who was excellent for you and they've gone bad, but it wasn't the case, right?
Well, you let me down. And I think as a woman, I don't know, maybe because I maybe a little more empathetic, I just felt really let down by this person and really kind of deceived. And I think you touched on it, Ollie, like salespeople, if you can't sell yourself, don't be in sales. And this person was a classic one of those. Salespeople always interview well, because guess what? If we can't, you don't want to hire us to sell your product. And I always say that, you know, this person would have been one that just nailed the interview, nailed that first impression, get me all the warm and fuzzies. I remember coming home and telling my husband, oh my gosh, I got this rock star and here's this deal and I'm so delighted. And like, I think that fall from grace was a big lesson for me. And, you know, you're leading here with a business hat, Victoria. You're not looking for friendships with these people. If something looks too good to be true, it may be. And also take a look at the data before you lead on the warm and fuzzy feelings, because any salespeople can give you the warm and fuzzies. Not every salesperson's performance is backed up by data. So I haven't done that since. I haven't picked a leading horse or built an emotional like for a rep since, because I think I'm still traumatized by that fall from grace.
Good lesson learned. Fair enough. I'll go through a couple quick fire questions and then we can wrap up. You ready?
I'm ready.
We practiced this earlier. I may change some on you just to be fun. What's the highest number of cold calls you've made in any given day?
100.
100. Solid number, not too bad. What's the average deal size ballpark that you think you've worked on over your whole career?
Ooh, big range. Average, probably 500K to $1 million.
Nice. Okay. The higher number obviously being stronger here. Out of 100, what would you rate your cold email skills at?
Oh, I love a cold email. I think I'm good there. I'm pretty strong there. Solid 90.
90? Okay, cool. What about cold calling?
The accent is a hit or a miss there, Ollie, because if people don't understand me, I don't get off to a great start with a cold call, but I'd say a 70. I'm okay.
Okay, 70. I had that a few times. My first few calls, it just, people said, what? And I'm like, did you not hear me? But no, it's me.
Yeah, exactly.
So that's good fun. Okay, management skills out of 100.
Oh, work in progress for me. Like I said, it wasn't natural. I still don't think I'm great at it. 65, 70.
All right, 65, 70. You got to pick one of these two. You got to use social media to reach out or send them a video. Which one?
Social. Every day.
Social, okay.
LinkedIn.
I think I might ask you this in 2 points. What was this like at a BDR time in your life, and what is it now? What time do you wake up in the morning?
Always been the same. I'm a morning person. Wake up at 6:30.
6:30. Wow. Yeah. Could you teach me how to do that, please?
I'm also in bed by about 8:30 p.m. at the night. So, it bows out the other end.
You don't watch Suits until too late at night. That's what it is.
Exactly.
Got you. Okay. What did you want to be when you grew up? When you were a child, what was your ideal job?
I wanted to be an actress on the stage, funnily enough.
You want to be
I remember seeing musicals like Oliver Twist and Les Mis and Cats and thinking that would really be me. I could do that.
Was there a particular actress you kind of wanted to set the standard on?
Oh, good question. No, I don't think so. I just love the whole idea of the glitz and the glam and the fame and the stage and the lights and the costumes. And it's funny because now when I have to public speak on a stage, I'm terrified. And I could have done it at 9 in front of 10,000 people, no problem. And even now I give keynotes in front of a couple of hundred people and I'm terrified. So something's changed.
Can't have all the answers, can we? Okay, last one. And then we'll do the where can people follow you. So thanks for coming on, but who should we have on this podcast after you that you might be able to introduce us to?
Oh, you're putting me on the spot here.
You can think about it, but I'm going to push you.
What about the sales mentor who changed my entire career and is now the CEO of quite a large cybersecurity company?
That would be a really good layup. Yeah, we could talk about what you were really like in those first years. And
I'll have to bribe him. No, maybe not him.
Okay, I'll follow up with you about that like a true salesperson. Okay. But this has been awesome. Thank you very much. I want to make sure that before everyone tunes off, because this is the point when everyone goes, okay, done, no more questions in their podcast. Where can people find you and the work that you do and connect with you?
Yeah, you can find me at 3cliffs.ca. So as of right now, I am a breast cancer survivor. If that's the one thing we didn't touch on yet. I was diagnosed at 38 years old last year with breast cancer. I'm better, it's gone. And I've now set up my own sales training company, sales enablement company called 3cliffs.ca. And I've launched the AE playbook. You'll find all the details there. If you are in sales and you're looking for any tips or tricks or mistakes to learn from the ones I've made, that's where you'll find me. And you can also find me on LinkedIn under Victoria McGlone. Good stuff. We're glad to hear that you're doing well and feeling good. Thank you again for coming on. This was really good. You handled my questions very well. Maybe I'll need to be a bit harder and firmer for the next guest, but I guess you'll have to tune in for that. So thank you everyone who made it this far. Well done. You've got a great attention span, far greater than me. And I hope you enjoyed the episode. This was the first one we recorded, and then we've got a couple more coming up in the next few weeks. So let us know what you think. Send me a message, send Victoria a message. Tell her well done for being such a good guest. And we'll see you in the next one, folks. Thanks very much. Thanks for having me.